Hello, I am Sarah Snell Cook, your host at the Credit Union Connection. I'm here today with Alkami's Director of Product Management, Brad Cranford. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about this recent research that Alkami has done. In the meantime, though, Brad, why don't you do a little more introduction of yourself and the research?
Sure, absolutely. My name's Brad Cranford. I've been at Alkami for about 8 years now within our product organization. I'm a director within our team. I manage all of our security and fraud integrations and solutions within our platform. So I work with customers every day around managing, detecting fraud, mitigating that fraud risk, and all of those solutions and features.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, I'm not terribly surprised to see the results of your research. There's 25% increase in fraud losses year over year. So how was that increase comparing to past years? And I know you, what are you doing about it? What are you personally doing about it?
Yes. Well, so, this is a trajectory that we've really seen since 2020 when digital fraud kind of really went, through the roof with the Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP loans, et cetera, really kind of drove a lot of digital fraud. It was an opportunity where there was a lot of money out there. And that, I think that created a lot of professional organizations around digital fraud. And so they've continued to evolve and get more active. And so we continue to see this growth as that honestly is a whole industry that is built around taking people's money.
Yeah. You would think that if they took the brain power it took to be bad guys, they could be really good guys.
Right. Right.
So how much increase does the evolution, and I might want to, I'd probably say revolution of AI account for in this?
Yeah, that's a great question. Obviously AI is on everyone's mind and trying to understand the impact of it. Um, the impacts are somewhat subtle in some ways because you don't fraud isn't detected as like, oh, that was AI fraud, right? Like it's
Sure.
fraud that happens. And so we're deriving that from some of the behaviors. But the key thing that we see here is that AI tools are helping the bad actors lower the cost of doing the things that they're doing. They can become proficient either in the tools or the scripts or in the language or the terminology, the things that they need faster and easier. So it's easier for someone to become a pretty good bad actor. They lower the cost, and AI continues to lower the cost of that activity.
But that works in reverse as well, correct?
Correct. Fortunately, it also gives us a lot of great tools. And so you kind of end up with both sides of that. From a defense standpoint, AI gives us much better data. It lets us make better decisions. And we kind of drive not just based upon assumptions, but what the data actually shows us is ways to combat and stop those actions. So it is impacting both sides of the equation. It's making it cheaper for bad actors to engage and grow and move faster when they find a successful program. But it's also leveraging institutions' ability to, have better data about what's happening and spot the actual trends and not just have to work off of assumptions.
Right, right. And so this may be a silly question, but what effect will AI have on cyber fraud going forward?
I think it's going to continue both of those trends,
Mhm.
right? We're going to see it continue to get easier for those things to move quickly.
Mm.
There's two parts of that. One, when bad actors find a successful program, process or whatever, they can spread very fast. AI tools make it really easy for someone to get up to speed and to run with that really quickly. And it helps them again sound more proficient. I think we mentioned that previously. If Because social engineering is still a huge part of it,
Mm.
but it helps you with language. It helps you with the professional speak necessary for a particular field that you're trying to interact with. And so they can step up much easier. But it will also continue to give us better data, give better tools that you can look at and understand that behavior. And so I think both sides are being benefited by AI.
And so one of the scariest things I think that came out of the research was that about a third of financial institutions are not doing enough to protect their member data, their customer data for the four-letter word. But so what more can these credit unions and other institutions do to protect that data?
The good news there is that a lot of it is relatively obvious. It is honestly training is incredibly impactful when it comes to improving your ability to protect your members' data. Um, we need to be really great at all the basics because these things move quickly and they can replace things very quickly. If there's any breakdown in your ability to your staff's ability to manage those things, if they don't follow all the protocols, et cetera, they'll find a gap in that process.
Right.
And so training remains incredibly important to that process. And you need to be able to be really good at all the basics because and as much as we talk about AI is often used through social engineering. Social engineering is so often a factor, whether they're trying to social engineer your end users or they're trying to social engineer your staff. All of those angles can be attacked. And so really I would say training is the number one thing and kind of building off of that. Make sure you're really good at all the basics. You don't necessarily have to invent something new. You have to be good at the things that we know you should be doing.
Right. Innovation isn't necessarily brand new. It's what new to your organization. Um, and I think obviously, having served on the board of a credit union, stepping up the training of the internal folks is super important. Um, and I'm sure it's important to the regulators as well. So, what role does or should regulation play in FI's cybersecurity going forward?
Yeah, I think there's two really key points to think about when it comes to regulation. One is obvious. I think financial institutions are generally really good at regulation. They understand the importance of it. They will have a whole organization and workflow to be really good at dealing with regulation. And so you need to embrace it. It is incredibly critical. The regulations are there for good reasons. It will lead you toward best practices and make sure that you're doing the things to be safe. I'd say the second part though is don't depend on it. We're in an environment right now where regulations are changing and sometimes in pretty rapid ways. And you can't just rely on regulations to tell you what the right thing to do is. And I think that's kind of to me, the key point is that we generally know what the right thing, when you're doing the right thing to protect your users, to protect your data. Just if there's not a regulation to cover it, doesn't mean it's not the right thing to do. So it's you want to do both of those things, really embrace regulation, but also don't limit your actions based upon that. You need to move beyond it and do the right things to protect your data.
I mean, just what you were saying demonstrates how far behind the regulation is versus the technology itself that's incredibly capable. So do credit unions need to do more or different trainings with their staff? What,
Yeah, so that's a good question. I think it's worth repeating that to me the biggest part is do the basics, be really good at the basics, continue to do and embrace the training that it provides dividends all the way through. So it's worth the effort of doing that training. Your staff needs to stay ready and to make sure that you're aware of what's happening and those things that are going on. And so if you slow down on those programs, you have opportunity for new people or turnover or just kind of getting into old habits and not doing the right things and being really aware of that. So part of it is just be really good at what you know to do already.
mhm.
The second part would be to make sure that you're also taking advantage of sharing information within your organization, whether that's cross-functional, across teams. Bad actors they're not going to give up just because one thing blocks them, right? If they can't get through a check fraud, they're going to work on ACH fraud. If they can't make that work, they're going to come into the branch. And we're seeing old fraud patterns reemerge, right? Check fraud is on the rise, right? In the world of everything being digital, check fraud is one of the biggest problems financial institutions deal with today. If you get your digital banking really, really secure, bad actors will literally walk into your branch and try to work through, old systems through there as well. So all of that training is really important. But sharing information, whether that's across those teams, so that there you see the patterns of what's happening here because it will impact what's happening elsewhere, and also across branches. Again, old-fashioned fraud still happens, and if they can't make it work at one branch, they'll go visit another branch and they'll keep trying until they find one that'll let them, get away with, the bad check or whatever they're trying
Right,
to do.
right. Everything old is new again. Uh,
Indeed.
so the other thing is that Koreans need to be communicating with their members, educating them on how to stay safe and keep their data safe, because a lot of times through social engineering, that is where their data individually may be taken, and it could have to do with the credit union data or their Amex card or whatever. And those numbers are still going up regardless of the education out there. So is that doing any good? Do we still need to be doing that?
Yeah, I understand that question. I think it's a situation where it's expensive and it probably often feels difficult to measure whether you're having an impact there, but it really does make a difference if you're engaging with your users and teaching them how to protect themselves, making themselves aware of those programs that are out there, the scams and all the things that are happening. They're your best first defense, right? If they're not reusing usernames and passwords, if they're not giving out their SMS codes, if they're, all of the things that they can easily get moved into, then those things don't hit your system and your staff doesn't have to clean it up later or help them chase those things down. We have a recent good example with a customer that was implementing a P2P solution, and they had some initial fraud in there, and people were not making great decisions about how they used it, made themselves really open to it. They instituted basically a solution of saying, we're initially going to give it to you, but with really low limits. And if you want higher limits, talk to us. And they really just took the users through, like, we'll raise your limits, but before we do so, we want to make sure you understand the risk. If you let someone get into your account, then they can move this much, like they just sort of walk them through the basics of it. And they found a significant reduction in that type of fraud for users that just listened to a representative talk to them for a few minutes and tell them about the risk of doing that.
Hmm.
And so, like, basic education does make a difference. It's not foolproof. They're still going to give things away at times, but it's always easier to stop it earlier up the chain than to catch it later, to rely on your other. It's more expensive for you all the way through. So
Mm.
that's always really good. The other thing I would really say around credit unions and this training is really important is credit unions have a really unique relationship with their customers and a lot of brand involvement there for them, right?
Mhm.
And so they're able to be an advocate for you, and they will help you if you build that bridge with them. They will help you identify phishing sites that have popped up. If they see them first and report them, you can get them taken down and help protect the rest of your members as well. So you have a great relationship through credit unions that if you're doing training in a way that is that they see as being part of that shared relationship of being, a member of something, right? And you're all working together. That education can be very powerful. It doesn't solve everything, but it can certainly help.
And in addition, I mean, the side benefits too of building that trust with the member, and spending just quality face time with them, showing that you care about, keeping their money safe, is a good thing too. Um, do you think that fraud might improve as more tech savvy generations come of age?
I'm probably in the pessimistic side of that question. I would say don't hang your hat on a generational assumption there. One of the things that AI data has shown us is that a lot of our assumptions about age-based, risk of fraud aren't necessarily always true. If you're looking for it, you'll find people that fall for it at every age group.
Hmm.
And the risks are different because you've got different people and different behaviors. But I wouldn't say the next generation is necessarily going to be immune to it in any way. One of the things that we see in Gen Z, for example, that is very disturbing to older generations is that they don't use Google to go find information. They'll use things like TikTok
Hmm.
for financial advice and how to that's their Google, right? To solve those things. So that both makes them more savvy in learning some things, but it makes them more susceptible to other types of misinformation and fraud, et cetera. So I think with every generation, there'll be different flavors of how fraud, what types of fraud are successful and what programs, if you're doing it in a very general standpoint. But I don't think there's going to be like a more secure generation. I think is you have to assume that fraud will continue to be very active and creative across generations. And it's not necessarily about technical savvy. It's so much of it again is social engineering that it's appealing to whatever is important to that person, regardless of their generation.
Yeah, somebody had me freaked out the other day. There was an email that I got and it had an unsubscribe link. They're like, don't click on that. You don't know if that's the spam, that's the phishing link.
Right,
You
right.
really gotta watch it. So yeah, I allow all my guests to have the final thought. So what do you have to leave our credit union executive audience with today?
Well, I think I really do appreciate the time to get to talk to you. These are great questions. The main thing I would tell your audience is be vigilant, but don't be afraid. I think people hear fraud and they get really nervous and feel overwhelmed by the challenge. And I think it's like any other part of doing business, right? Like you lock your front doors even though that's not foolproof for someone getting into your house. You do the things to make sure that you're safe, and you stay up to speed. And I think asking these sorts of questions and continuing to check that you're doing the right things. Has anything changed? Are we actually doing the things that we thought we were doing? Those are all things that build your own patterns and safety. And those are all good behaviors. And I think this is fortunately, I think everyone sees that there are challenges here and are taking the time and energy to stay on top of it, and that'll make us all better. It'll make all these institutions be able to be safe and feel comfortable moving forward.
Excellent, Brad. Thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you very much.